Morning, folks. Mike Sharkey, the Executive Director of Data and Analytics at Enterprise Technology. So good to see everyone here. This is the 7th, 8th year, I lost track, of doing our data conference. And I know when I talk to colleagues at other universities, I literally brag about our data community. I talk about how we come together, how we share data, how we share ideas, and this is sort of the shining star of that concept. So love that everyone is here. Love that you're going to get value from talking to partners across the hall, from going to sessions, from delivering sessions for many of you. So please absorb, talk, network, enjoy. That's what this is all about. So our theme, navigating data in an AI world. We're data folks, and then there's this crazy AI thing that happened the last couple of years, and we're like, hey, we're still here writing reports and writing some SQL and building a dashboard. That's kind of important. And I like that relationship. I like to explore what that means. And so our keynote today I'm going to introduce is going to talk about that. Tomorrow we have two amazing colleagues of mine, Elizabeth Riley, who runs the AI acceleration team in Enterprise Technology, Aaron Berenger-Sterner, who's the Chief Data Officer of Enterprise Partners. They're going to talk about how AI has affected business intelligence and reporting. And so that theme's going to run throughout. So thank you for all being here. Please, I want to make sure everyone gets value. So, talk, listen, learn. We've got lots of sessions. If you find time where you're not going to a session, please go across the hall and talk with our partners. They have lots of good things to show. All of them will be presenting at sessions as well. So please, please, please take advantage. All right, I am going to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Phil Hill. So Phil is a friend and colleague of mine. Phil is a consultant, analyst, blogger. If anyone's followed higher ed technology for the last, 20 years, you've probably read something by Phil, read a blog post, read a research analysis by him. And what I really like, besides his incredibly good sense of humor and sharp sense of analysis, is he brings the data. If you read any of his pieces, there's almost always data to back it up. It's demographic data, financial data, which really kind of is the hallmark of what he does. So Phil's going to chat a little bit about AI, and then he and I are going to sit down for a little bit of a chat. We also would love to have questions from folks. As you hear what Phil's talking about, please feel free. We'll have people with mics going around, and so I want to make sure there's the opportunity for you all to ask questions. And how does this relate to you? This is our time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Phil Hill.
Thank you. I realize I need to go shopping a little bit more often. I've got the exact same shirt on as I do in here. My wife would notice that. Well, thank you. It's great to be here and talk. And as we're talking about data and AI is sort of the general theme. By the way, here the newsletter on edtech.philhillah.com is where you can find that. But as I was coming down here, for anybody who was on Scottsdale Road driving south, I apologize. I was the one in the Waymo driving in the left lane for about 5 miles down Scottsdale Road. And as you know, Waymo, it will not, go above the speed limit. So I'm actually uncomfortable because driving the speed limit, but we're staying in the left lane. I don't know who to yell to. But it's interesting watching the real-time data as you do Waymo. It's actually an interesting opportunity to see the interaction of data going into an AI system, especially once you get on campus, because now you're not just talking about stoplights and cars, you're talking about scooters, people walking across, not even thinking about right of way. It was actually quite fun watching that real-time data. So this is probably a crowd that would be similar to me, actually sitting in a Waymo, and I'm actually looking at the screen most of the time, trying to see how it interacts. It's been fascinating. But on this topic of data and AI, I actually sense that there's a change going on, or it's starting to go on beyond the initial view. Most people in the popular imagination, of course, they're not going to go to this level of detail, but they think of generative AI in terms of a massive set of training data, which is all public data. It scraped it off of the web, maybe a few agreements. It's training a model, coming up with weights, and then it's got all the data is labeled. And so there's a feedback mechanism to say, is that actually a strawberry? No, it'll feed back and update the dates. But there's this massive set of public data creating a massive large language model. And most people know it just generically as Chat GPT or Llama or whatever the case may be. And then when it's time for actual inference, which most educators, most the public won't know that term. That means when you're actually interacting with the AI, what do I do with it? Asking a question, what is this image? It's running through the model that took the weights. It's no longer represented as the source data, but weights of the model. When it comes out with an answer, bicycle. Now, most educators, most of people in the public are not going to think at even this level of detail, but there's this view of massive data and then getting these answers. Now that raises some questions. Wait, are you training the data? So for example, how much of my newsletter has gone into training the data? I'm waiting for them to send the check, but they haven't yet. But from an educator standpoint, what about course material? What about massive open online courses where your course material is out in the public domain? And what about students in that bottom level? If you're using AI in a classroom and students do something, are you going to take the data of what the students are saying or even the questions they're asking? And is that going to be part of training the model moving forward? So they're very legitimate questions around data and AI, but it's based on this model, which is already becoming an outdated model. And we need to think beyond that and the possibilities of where private data fits into this overall model. Here's the biggest hint. If you think you're going to be able to fight back against all this public data being used to train the models, it's a losing fight. For better or worse, that's not going to change things. We're getting into a world where there's a lot more fine tuning with private data. And the two main concepts behind this, retrieval augmented generation, RAG, or fine tuning. Now, the difference is fine tuning is going to be more where you're actually taking a large language model that costs billions to create, but then you're adding additional data or you're fine tuning it. So for example, I'm taking this model, but I'm fine tuning it for customer support purposes. And the key issue is that private data and training, if you will, updates the model itself. So that specialization creates a new model or fine tunes it. RAG is different. That gets much more into when you run and somebody asks questions, go to this source of data, whether it's private or public, to get your answers. And I think this is very significant because there's a general move to democratize access to information that is enabled by generative AI. And there's going to be a long-term trend of trying to get data access and information access closer to the hands of the end users. Now, for us in here, that primarily means instructors, faculty, students, course designers, end users, and it's getting closer and closer to them. Now, you'll notice here external knowledge required. RAG is much higher on knowing what your specific examples are. Fine tuning is much more about the model adaptation. And it's very low in RAG. Now, you can combine these. Now, if you look at the general benefits, by the way, this link that I have on here is a great article about this concept. So I highly recommend going to that link and reading about it. RAG is going to external knowledge required, yes, but it also gets into like, can it minimize hallucinations where AI goes and gives a wrong answer? And it also gets into how easy can it interpret? There's a lot of power in these new concepts that are becoming a reality, and I think that we need to be prepared for it as you guys think about the data implications. Most people, at least that I know of, when they think about how do I fine tune an AI, they think of this. They think of like a complex model where they need IT specialists. They need a lot of the people in this room to create it. And there's a lot of specialization and it takes a lot of time to do this. So there's a general vague sense of, I know somebody could help set this up for me. What I think is happening that we need to be aware of is it's also advancing in terms of end users getting closer to be able to do this stuff themselves. And I think it's going to have a big impact on how educators, academic departments, individual faculty think about what they can do moving forward, where AI fits in to an academic mission and where it doesn't. Two examples of this are Claude projects, where you can create your own custom stuff through what they call a project, or OpenAI created custom GPTs. And the idea is you could now give it your own data and your own set of instruction. And both of these create chatbots still. But through this, they can actually start saying, I want you to look at this data. So access private data, but you don't have to have the complexity of retraining a model. And there's some really big implications of this. The example I wanted to use, sort of a real-time example, if you will, is, and I mentioned this just to give you a sense of where I think the democratization is coming and how close we're getting. I was flying out east. I wanted to create a custom GPT and a custom Claude project using the newsletter content that I write about. And so what I essentially did is I said, well, let's create an on EdTech chatbot. In both cases, I gave it this level of instructions. It's right here. And I'm telling the model, you will first analyze the documents in the knowledge base. That's my private data. That's me uploading on EdTech data in there. Now, I haven't fully figured out how to do the premium newsletter that's behind a paywall versus the free newsletter that's just out and open on the web. So I'm still working this through. But I told it that, and I said, your role is to go through the knowledge and answer the questions. You should only refer to the files in the knowledge base. I'm telling it, don't go out and just make up your own answers. And then I tell it, analyze the question, go through the base, answer properly. And then I even give it a format, say, give like 2 or 3 sentences of details after you give a pretty straightforward answer. For today, and part of what I'm going to show, I just was having fun. I said, well, first answer in the form of a haiku, then go through and answer this. But I wanted to go through this just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. And by the way, I did this flying to the East Coast, so it was a 4-hour flight on a plane, uploaded the data, created the model, and was able to do this. Now, I did a little bit of research. I have some domain knowledge, but the point was, this was not a huge task. It wasn't me handing it off to a large IT organization that could do it. It was me closer to being an end user using the available tools to do this myself. And to give one example before I bring Mike up and we have more of a fireside chat format, I asked for anybody who's read the newsletter. I write a lot about the regulatory environment right now. The current administration, the Department of Ed, is passing and trying to pass a lot of regulations that impact online education, including taking attendance in all online courses. And I've written about how that would be a massive impact. And there are other things. This is the main model. This is not my custom model. And I asked what regulations are being used or being introduced to rein in online education and who is pushing for these. The primary model comes back and says, I want to be helpful, but I'm letting you know I got nothing since April. So it's all before April. And then they just throw out a couple things, COPPA, which is more of a K-12 issue. So it just throws out some very generic ideas about online education and privacy. It really didn't address my question. If I were teaching a course on this, not very useful. Now, when I did the exact same thing, but with this custom model that I did, it came back with, well, first the haiku, many tools now bloom beyond the LMS walls, growth flows elsewhere now, which I found interesting because I've written quite a bit about how the LMS might be the hub, but a lot of learning activity happens in third-party apps, and it's an ecosystem approach. And you can tell sort of where it got some of this from. But then the headline answer was about this concept that I have written about. I know where a lot of this information comes. LMS integration challenges the highlight shift away from platform centrality, away from the idea that all you have to care about is one platform. Nothing against Canvas, but it's a system that integrates to others, and increasingly we need to see the whole ecosystem. And then it says, based on the documents, they're no longer the sole thing, blah, blah, blah. But it even gets into third-party courseware with specific examples. It even talks about attendance tracking requirements that were introduced this summer. So it's very up to date, and it's capturing that information. And it goes and actually gives a pretty darn good answer based on this question. And then I even said, could you give the most relevant source? So it gave a link to one of the posts that I've written. Think of this in terms of if you're an academic department and the possibility you now have where you could say, I'm going to take generative AI models, but we have our private course content from people in our department. We can tell a system what to do that fits within our pedagogical beliefs. And we can even say, don't go outside of this, use our information. And there's a lot of power that's opening up where you could do this type of mix of public and private data and solve some problems. Now, I'm not saying this in terms of, hey, hooray, this is great. You know, there's no problems with this. My real point is saying, we need to be looking about where things are going. And I think we're getting into a new wave of AI, and we need to be dealing with what are the implications beyond just ChatGPT as an open usage of AI and what people think of. We need to be thinking about what's going to be happening a couple years down the road, and what are the possibilities to do it while protecting our data and controlling the answers, and then trying to figure out, well, what are the downsides of this model? And let's address those as well. So I'm going to bring Mike up, and we're going to have more of an interactive discussion on this topic. But I just wanted to set some context of where I see a lot of this work going.